Greetings and welcome to the Faith and Firearms Project. My name is Michael Chan. In this mini documentary, we'll have the opportunity to learn about a company called FOG, or FOG, which is an acronym for Finger of God. I first had the opportunity to encounter this company at a local gun show here in the Twin Cities in St. Paul, Minnesota. And while perusing the different booths and talking to people, I noticed this very prominent booth with the sign FOG, or FOG, Finger of God. And given the nature of my project, I knew I needed to learn something about this company. So I talked a little bit with some of the people at the desk, asked them about their company, and eventually took a card. And after meeting them, I dug a little bit into their company's background and into what they do, and found out that they are, as their name suggests, the owners are religious people, and in fact Christians, and that their company, in addition to being an ammunition and firearms company more generally, is also a contributor to a ministry called On Eagle's Wings, which, as you can see on the screen in front of you, receives benefits from FOG. They say that a portion of the proceeds from the sale of all the products go to support this ministry. So seeing all these connections between firearms and faith, I reached out to the owners, John and Diana, and they were gracious enough to invite me and my wife and our child to visit them in northern Minnesota. And so in this mini documentary, you'll have the opportunity to hear from them, to hear some of their own stories of faith, and also the story of the company and how all of those things are related to one another. I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping to ask you just a couple questions about your faith in general. The two of you are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Diana, since you were just talking a moment ago, you could tell us a little bit about your own history as a Christian, your story.
Sure.
Yeah.
My parents became believers at a young age. For me, I was pre-kindergarten, and they always grew up believing in God, but didn't have really a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And my dad took a Dale Carnegie course and met a man who was very much in love with Jesus, and his passion for Christ and for people just kind of flowed over to my parents, and they became Christ followers I suppose they were around 30. And they drove several hours every Sunday down to a church that was actually held outside, I believe. So it must have been in the summertime. And they'd take my brother and I, and we'd stay all day and have a picnic, and then they'd stay for evening services. And then they decided they needed to find a church closer to home where they could get us involved in things. And so I grew up in a very loving Christian home. And for me, it was when I went to summer camp that it finally became real for me. We had a gentleman, I know his name was Tony. I can't think of what his last name was, but he was the speaker that week at camp, and he had ran across the United States, and everywhere he went, he used that as a platform to tell people about his love for Jesus. And something clicked for me that week. I don't know if it was just his testimony and his obvious love that I could see for Christ. I know that I was really taken by my counselor that week. She was a young black gal. I remember she had this big afro. I'd never seen an afro before, but she just was the most loving gal. Her name was Mar, and between those two people that week, we went to an evening service, and I came back to my cabin, and I told my counselor Mar that I wanted what they had, and I wanted a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I remember being in my cabin, and all the other girls were coming in and out, slamming the door, but she was on the floor with me on our knees and helped me pray to accept Christ as my Savior. And so going home from that, I was really excited about it, and grew a lot. And I met John in high school, and we were 15 when we started dating each other. So We've been together for a long time. Got married when we were 20, and had our first child at 23. And we've gone through periods of our life where we kind of stepped back away from the church and from God, and didn't do real well on our own. And then we'd have other things that would come into our life that I think God was gently reminding us that we really weren't in control, that He's in control, and that we needed to have our dependency on them. I have wonderful role models in my parents. And you were asking also what our definition of God was. And
yeah, sure, let's go there.
I think for me, it kind of segues with what I was saying. I had great mentors as parents, and when I think about God the Father, I really assimilate it with my father. He's a very gentle man. He loves people, and that's my idea of God the Father. Sorry, I get emotional when I think about my dad.
Your father was a missionary and a photographer. And
he grew up as a photographer.
He lives still.
Yeah, yep. He was a professional photographer, and when Brandon, our oldest son, was just a few weeks old, my parents had made the decision to become missionaries, and they went to the mission field in Venezuela, and they sold everything and went. And it was a real interesting time for John and I, because I was pretty dependent on my parents, and I still think a lot of my faith was based on what I saw with them. And having them leave and go so far away helped me to put my dependence on God, not through my parents, but my own faith, and grew my own faith and my dependence on my husband as the leader of our home, instead of always on my parents. So even though I was happy for them, they were doing something that they really felt God was calling them to do, and my two younger sisters went with them and went to high school there in Venezuela. But I think it was a really good growing up time for me, that I was able to test the waters and figure out what Diana's faith was, not the faith of my parents. So anyway, that's kind of my background as far as my Christian faith. And we've had a lot of things happen through us through the years to bring us closer to God. I'll let you tell yours.
Yeah, John,
even today, I first thing in the morning, last thing at night, I just thank God for the day that she walked into my life, because she's the one that started me down the path. And people say, do you remember when? And I can remember. It was March the 27th, 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And
you were in high school.
That was the year after high school. We met when we were in high school. But.
Yeah, and I remember praying with her in the car, and I really, I was truly, at that point in my life, was a rebel without a cause, and why she ever saw in me other than trouble is beyond me. But anyway, I thank God that she was there, because she's the one that led me, and her family, seeing her family and their walk, it was real helpful and for me to understand it. So anyway, that was when I made the commitment, was then 1977, and true to form, I was on fire for about a year and a half, and then nothing else really changed. I still had the same friends, and we all partied and did our same stuff, and it just wasn't walking with God the way that I should be, and I knew it at the time, and it was the 70s. I had all sorts of my own issues, and found myself at a crossroads, and both in my marriage and in my spiritual life, and needed to make the decision. It was time to shut up or get out. And so basically, I and my friends never really did. I lost a lot of friends over my decision to walk with God at that point in time, because they couldn't see it. They thought I was just some fanatical Christian. So it was a tough decision, but it was definitely the right one. And we've raised our kids, and Fortunately, my children are born again believers, and it's sure been wonderful to be able to walk with the Lord through all of this. He's given us strength when we really needed it.
Yeah. And so, if you had to give a definition to what it means to be a Christian, what would you say?
Go ahead.
If you had to write the dictionary entry.
Yeah. I tell people that we're Christ followers.
I've heard you use that term a number of different times.
Yeah. And I think Christ, when he was here on this earth, was an amazing example. And he really loved people, no matter where they were, at what place they were in their life. And I think that that's his commandment to us, is to love people. And it's not always easy to love people. But I know that if I love Christ, he will give me the opportunity to love people that are out there. But, I say that I ask Christ in my heart. And I think that's a Christian term. And it really just means that you ask him to be in control of your life. That you're not in the driver's seat, that you know that you give in to him and allow him to have you walk the way that he wants you to, do the things that he wants you to do. And I think that's really confusing for people, because a lot of people feel like it's a list of things that you have to do right. And it really isn't. I think that's secondary to making sure that your life aligns with what Christ wants it to be. And that's why we say it's a heart issue. We make it so difficult that people don't understand it, but it's really simple. It's just simply asking Christ to be in control and to be the leader of your life and to help you do what he wants you to do. Years ago, that bracelet that was out, that WWJD,
oh, sure.
What would Jesus do? I thought that was really neat, because really he is supposed to be our ultimate example of what would he do in these situations. So anyway, that's what I try to do, is just follow the teachings of Christ and to do what he asked me to do. And I'm not somebody who gets all excited about what church people go to or what religion they are, because I honestly believe that different churches are out there to meet the needs of different people. We all have different ways that we worship, and that it goes back to a heart issue. It doesn't matter what church you go to, as long as you have things right with Jesus Christ. So,
John, what about you? How would you define a Christian?
Well, I'm really in my heart, I'm a Southern Baptist. I mean, it's very simple for me. I'm a fire and brimstone guy.
Right.
It's everything's black and white to me. It's very simple. So in one word, faith. And the majority of people just have so much trouble with that. They just can't move forward on faith. And I find that so hard to imagine, because for me it's just so simple. I know that Jesus Christ walked the earth. I know that he was crucified. I know that he was raised from the dead. And I know he sits at the right hand of God. And I know that he's my Savior. And for me, and people say, well, how do you know? It's faith. I know. I don't ever question it. I never have had to question it. And I guess it's back to that fire and brimstone thing. You either believe or you go to hell. It's as simple as that. Why? What's the problem? I mean, given the choice, I don't understand why anybody makes a different choice. They do. And but it's. I don't want to oversimplify it, because it's not. But it truly boils down to the faith of a child. And I just thank God and the Holy Spirit that they've put that faith of a child in me, because, I wanted to fight and struggle my whole life, and that's one thing that I've never had to struggle with. Yeah. And
though there have been some low points in your life, it sounds like maybe at least in what you told me earlier, some of those low points have helped to define the faith that you have today. Mm-hmm. Is that true, or am I reading too much?
No, that's true. I mean, I had issues with alcohol and drugs, and again, like I said, I wasn't walking with Christ at the time, I had salvation. As crazy as it is, I used to use the phrase all the time, and I think through it. And I guess as a Christian, as you mature, I guess one of the things is the older you get, that's one of the true blessings you get, because you get the opportunity to actually really think through things. But as I grew up and as I was going through this, I used to use this phrase. I said, "Well, people would say, are you a Christian?" Absolutely, I'm a Christian. I said, I may, when I get there, I may not have a crown on my head, but I'm probably tending the boilers, but I'm in the door. And and now I sit back and I think about that statement, and I thought, that's not really the way it's designed. I'm not supposed to just get in the door, and I'm supposed to do more with my life. And it wasn't until I started getting older, and I think kids had a lot to do with that. I mean, your responsibilities as an adult and a parent, and yeah, I've had all sorts of low times in my life, but the one constant that I have is I can always go to my knees and talk to my Father. And that's the difference. And people without faith don't have that. And frankly, I'm not sure how they survive a day without it.
Mm-hmm. Life is hard. I can't imagine going through this life without having God in it. I can't even imagine it.
When you talk to people, guys that have been in the military, they're in bad situations. You hear the same thing over and over. God, get me out of this, and I will, or I won't. And and it's amazing that in times of stress, that's what everybody always ends up going to God, whether they're believers or they're not. They're going to make that at some point in time. They're asking that question, or making that statement. And I just don't know why it takes so long for us all to get it in our heads. I'm glad I'm there. I'm glad I got there, and. It just makes things so much easier.
Mm-hmm. And for me too, it's more than just a get out of jail free card. Mm-hmm. It's not just, I know when I die that I'm going to go to heaven, because there's so much joy that's here on this earth. And, mm-hmm. We can just look around us, and how do you look around and not believe there's a God? How can you not look into a little baby's face and say there's not a God? There's just too many amazing designs that they can't happen by chance. And for me, it's all about the journey. I'm really glad that I know someday I'm going to be with him in heaven. And to me, that's what heaven is being with God. It isn't just this magical place where we're all going to dance around and pick tulips and see angels and all of that. I can't even imagine what heaven is going to be like, because I really think this earth is pretty fantastic, and it's supposed to be better than that. But it's about the journey and how we go on this journey and how we handle this journey and the people that we meet and the experiences that we have. And there's just so much joy in all of that. And we do have a choice. I have somebody that's very close to me right now that's going through a really, really tough time. And I know she's really leaning on the power of Jesus to comfort her and give her joy. And I called her the other day and wasn't sure who I was going to get on the other line. I just asked her how she was doing, and she said, outstanding. And it surprised me when she said that. And she said, I decided it's a choice. I can choose to be sad and with my circumstances, or I can choose joy in all of this. And the only ways that she can choose joy is because she knows that she's relying on her faith in God. And so I just don't know how people get through every day without that simple thing.
John, you talked earlier about how you became involved with guns. I think you mentioned your grandfather. But Diana, what's your story there?
My dad is a Korean vet, but we didn't really have guns growing up at all. I don't ever remember my dad going hunting or anything like that. I do remember a time when my brother had a little .22, but very nominal exposure to guns growing up. My exposure was when I met John, and I knew that was really important to him. But I just knew that this was something that was really important to him, and so all throughout periods of our life, John has gone hunting, and I'm very supportive of that, because I knew if he would be able to do this, he was a happier person when he was at home. It just brought him a lot of pleasure. So he's gone on a lot of trips by himself, and we've gone on a lot of trips together. And it wasn't until really a few years ago that I did more handgun shooting and became an NRA certified instructor, and decided that to take a more active role in the whole world of handguns.
Let's just do 2 more questions. So guns are a part of your life every day now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the business, you know, walk out, go to the office, you're loading ammunition, testing firearms as well. So they're obviously an important part of your life. What do they symbolize to you individually? When you think about guns, what kind of meaning do you attach?
The first thing that popped
Yeah.
into my head was freedom when you said that.
Oh, okay. Yes. So unpack that for us.
You know, our country was founded on freedom, and it's one of our rights is to bear arms, and I think that's going to be a tough one to ever take away from us as U.S. citizens. But that just symbolizes freedom, and we've had so many guys that have gone overseas to make sure that our freedoms stay intact, and it just gives me security to know that we have control of that in our lives. How about you?
Well, oddly enough, when you asked the question, the first word in my mind was freedom.
It's also freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's and I don't know if it's I always want the ability to protect myself and my family. I think that's part of it. But with me more than anything, because I come from the firearms side of the world, that's secondary to me because I am a hunter and a sport hunter, competition shooter. You know, that's really what's been important to me. As I progressed in the firearms industry, that's when the handguns came into play for me, and self-protection and things like that.
You started as a hunter, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I started. Somebody asked me when did I first start loading ammunition, and I pretty well blew off the end of my finger when I was 14, the first time doing it, and didn't know what I was doing, but that was it. So I loaded my first shotgun shell when I was 14 and set a primer off in my hand. It's just. You know, to me now, it's a way of life, and in the community that we live in, it's a way of life because a lot of these people depend on it's almost subsistence hunting for them here. Mm-hmm. You know, if they don't get their bear and their deer and get it in the freezer, they don't have meat for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not quite so much like it is in Alaska, but I have a lot of friends that actually rely on that. So there's more to it than just our right to keep and bear arms, which is monumental in my eyes. It's a way of life here, mm-hmm. and it's very important.
That's really true. I was talking to one of our pastors the other day, and actually I saw him at the grocery store, and he was getting a couple things. He had taken a turkey out of the freezer that he had gotten last year, and they were going to grill it and make enchiladas, actually for their dinner tonight.
Turkey enchiladas?
Turkey enchiladas, yeah. And he told me another story not that long ago that one of them didn't pull their bear tag this year, and they were really worried about it because they count on that meat to get them through the wintertime. And that is really the way of life up here. A lot of people up here don't make big figures like they do in a larger city, and they count on being able to hunt to put meat in their freezer for their family to feed them. So it is a really important part of the culture, especially up here in northern Minnesota.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So last question, you kind of alluded there to maybe a divide between cities and, you know, I guess we would call it rural areas, mm-hmm. or areas that aren't, you know, in an urban center. What do you think people who don't live this lifestyle, maybe haven't grown up around firearms, don't really see any need for them, what do those kinds of people misunderstand about people like you?
Well, I think there's a lot of preconceived ideas about people who own guns and that they're important to them. You know, that they're a bunch of hicks and whack jobs. And, you know, I guess the best example that I can give is we spend a lot of time down in Florida, and our neighbor right next door to us is from the UK, where they can't have guns unless you're in the police force or have special permits. And one of our other neighbors happens to be a physician in an ER, and he sees a lot of the bad, you know, gunshot wounds that come in and that type of thing. And it really took a while to talk to them and for them to get to know us as people, that we're just like them. We just happened to have.
So on both sides, there was kind of, they looked at you maybe differently.
Yeah. And we had some really interesting conversations with them. And they kind of thought of us as an oddity in the beginning. And then as they got to know us as people and what our values were and everything else, you know, we're not that different than anybody else. We just happen to have a hobby, have an interest in something that they feared. And I think once you educate people and talk to them about firearms and what your beliefs are, then those walls of fear come down, and you know, we're just average people.
It's an issue of education. I mean, you know, when you get into the cities, and not that there's not a lot of gun owners in the cities, because there is, but the people that fear it. I mean, you fear anything that you don't understand, that you don't know, and but to us, firearms up here is just it's normal. It'd be like somebody down there. You know, we own firearms just like they would own, I don't know, call it their books or whatever. I mean, it's just it's a possession that we utilize on a daily basis, and it's important to us. I mean, that would be, to try to take our firearms away from us in the environment we live in would be like if we went in and said, okay, you don't get to use your books anymore. You can't have books. That wouldn't make any sense. I wouldn't understand it. But obviously there's countries in the world that have done that, and won't allow them because they don't want the knowledge. Well, that's what happens. It's the same thing with our firearms. Without the proper knowledge, they don't know how to use them. They're afraid of them, and they don't get it. The governments were afraid of some of these. In these other countries, are afraid of knowledge, so they burn the books. That may be way out there, but it is. It's, to me, it's that simple. Again, I'm very black and white. It's just education. We have a very biased liberal media that you have a few people in power that it's their opinion, and they spend a lot of money making certain that, in fact, the way it goes. Look at our New York mayor. I mean, you know, the New York.
You're talking
mayor,
about Michael Bloomberg,
the
former mayor. Michael
former
Bloomberg.
mayor.
Yeah.
Bloomberg.
Mayor's. Oh, what is this group called?
Yeah.
Mayor's something gun violence. I'm forgetting a word there. Right.
And really, he's making the big push to try to get everybody to back him on the firearms, and it's not working because you're getting police departments that don't back him, and sheriffs that are saying we're not going to enforce it, and so it's an interesting time in the firearm industry, but we can't forget that it's our right, just like it's our right to be able, just like it's his right to be able to say what he wants to say. You know, he's protected by the First Amendment. We're protected by the Second Amendment, and that's okay as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And that's what it is. And I think the cities, the difference between, and in the Minnesota, it's really amazing because that's where our legislation comes from. Is obviously the population centers. That's where the majority of the votes are. But it's night and day when you compare firearm ownership in Walker, Minnesota, to firearm ownership in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh.
And so it's a way of life here, just like they have their own life there. And I don't think either one of them really infringes on the other. We just have to remember to respect each other's rights. Go ahead.
FOG stands for Finger of God, and we are Christ followers, and we wanted to make sure we honored him in our name. And the easiest way for us to do that was to put God in our name. We have gone through a lot in our journey and feel like God has always had his finger upon us of protection and love and grace and mercy, and we felt that this was a good way to be able to tell our story to people when they asked us about it. We also happen to teach concealed carry classes, and John could probably speak to this better than I can, but finger of God is a military term defining accuracy. So we do manufacture ammunition here, and one of the things that we feel very good about is the accuracy of our ammunition. So we kind of used it as a dual meaning.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't realize that background. And tell us about the kind of ammunition that you manufacture.
Well, we actually manufacture right now 21 different calibers.
Okay.
So everything from a 380 a 380 auto is the smallest that we do, and then
And this is the handgun cartridge.
handgun
a 380.
cartridge, that's correct. And then we actually do in production, we go up to a 308 is probably the largest in production. We also do all sorts of other items. We go up to a 500 Nitro Express that we'll do on a per order basis.
Sure.
And so all of our NATO calibers are run fully automated equipment.
Okay.
And then we do a lot of custom handwork for people also.
Yeah. Can you? There are probably people who are going to watch this who aren't familiar with the caliber systems. Can you give us just a really brief introduction? Like we hear about 223, or you just mentioned 308. What do those numbers even mean?
Well, basically, it's just a designation for the caliber, the cartridge size, and when you're looking at, and some of it's even confusing because there's so many different wildcats that have been created. And a wildcat is where they take a standard cartridge and then change it. They'll either neck it up, neck it down, shorten it, or whatever, and then but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different cartridges. The primary cartridges that we try to focus on are what the majority of the buying clientele would be after, which are what the majority of the firearms are manufactured in, which would be like your 9mm autos for your pistols, 40s, 45 autos, the 223s or 5.56 in the it's a military caliber, and the 308 Win, which is used. It's a good hunting round, but it's also a military round, and that's really the basis of the industry, and that's where people have a tendency to gravitate to, and that's why we manufacture those rounds.
Okay. How old is the company?
We started in 2011.
Oh,
We're
okay.
just starting our 4th year.
Right, and we're in 2015, so you're into the 4th year. Wow. And was it always a vision for it to be an ammunition company? Was that was how the idea was born?
Well, the company's actually Diana and Blake are the primary shareholders in the company, and
Blake is your son.
Blake is my son, yeah. And it was designed because I raised our boys hunting and fishing and outdoor activities all their lives. Blake had a unusual interest in firearms and had decided that he was going to go into gunsmithing.
Okay.
And so he got his formal education at Trinidad College in Colorado. And so gunsmiths typically starve. There's just not enough money in it. So when he decided that's the way he was going to go, Diana and I talked, and we felt that setting up something that would give him an opportunity to be able to pursue his passion, plus be able to make some money and support his family. So that's how the ammunition came into it.
Oh, okay. Earlier, as we were talking off camera, you talked about how when you go to different gun shows and selling venues, you'll pray over your ammunition. Is that right? Talk about that, Diane. I think you mentioned that, actually.
Yeah. Before any time we go to a gun show or to some kind of a sale that we're going to be selling our ammunition at, John and I always pray that God's will be done at the show, and that anybody who looks at buying our ammunition are buying it for sporting purposes or self-defense, so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands anywhere, because we are cognizant that there are people out there that tend to do harm, and we just want to make sure that the people we sell to are good people. And we really feel like God's protected us in all of that. We've met some amazing people at gun shows that share our faith or just share the love of sporting, going out and shooting at the range. We sell a lot to women, and we try to educate women that they also can defend themselves if they're in a situation that's not good. So that is our practice, to start every morning before we go to work in prayer that God's going to be in control over our day, but we also take time to pray, especially before a gun show, that our ammunition will not end up in any wrong hands.
Yeah, I imagine people ask about the company's name quite a bit. Fog, they wonder, well, what is this a reference to? Fog. The kind of fog you see in the early morning. How do people normally react to the name after you explain that it's an acronym?
We get one of two reactions. You either get, wow, that's really neat, and I love to do business with another company that are Christ-based or faith-based. We also support a ministry through our sales called On Eagle's Wings, and it's a ministry that helps get girls out of the sex trades. And they're based out of North Carolina, but they're into a couple islands down in the Caribbean now and in Florida, and we're really excited to be part of that. And I think when people see that we also are ministry based, we get a really positive reaction. And then we get the reaction from other people that just kind of stare at you like the deer in the headlights. Oh, but it's opened a lot of doors for good communication with people and opportunities to talk to people about our faith.
Yeah, and John, the connection to this particular ministry is also tied into your own kind of faith story, your own sense of what God has called you to. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. My mother her first marriage went really sideways, and there was some abuse that was there. And I always had in my heart that thank God for my grandfather who took us in and me at an early age, and Mom, she was young also at the time, and those gals a lot of times don't have places to go, and it's not safe. And so we always thought that it'd be nice if we could create a home, maybe someplace for these young women to go to that are troubled and have no place to turn. So that was kind of what our intention was, but just through the normal life-changing, altering events, we just didn't have the time or the resources to get that accomplished. So that's why when On Eagle's Wings came up, we thought that would be a great segue for us to be able to get into something that we really feel strongly about, provide the help and some of the things that are necessary for this group, and they're really doing, kind of what I had ultimately hoped to see happen.
You mentioned, Diana, that you often encourage women to, or maybe they show up for your classes and they're interested in learning about firearms. Is that a demographic that you see kind of on the rise in terms of firearms?
Yes.
It seems that every time I talk to people who are in this industry, they say that.
Yeah.
But that's your perception.
Yeah,
too.
We have a lot of we have educational classes,
okay.
and we'll
here on site,
just around this table, and we'll do women-only classes if they're intimidated by being in a group of guys, because a lot of women are new shooters. They didn't grow up shooting. We have some, especially up in northern Minnesota, that have, but a lot of women haven't done that, and they want to be in a class where there's other people at their skill level or that type of thing, and it just gives them a safe environment to do that. John is a very patient teacher. He's been wonderful with me as I've learned how to shoot, and we have a range that's here in the shop that we'll take him back and take all the time in the world with them to make sure they're comfortable with a gun before they would ever purchase one. And our classes are about half and half, aren't they? Half men and half women that are here. So yeah, there's a real rise in the interest in women carrying.
When we first started, when I took Diana to her first formal training, she was nervous as could be. A, because she really didn't have a lot of experience with a firearm, but B, because, and I won't say where we went, and I actually really like the facility, but they have a law enforcement. Most of the guys that are teachers are law enforcement or ex-military, and so they have a completely different demeanor about them, and they're very fact of the matter. And it's an issue of, they can be really loud, boisterous, and bossy.
They were screaming at me.
They were screaming at me.
Oh wow!
And so at that point in time, and she was very uncomfortable with it, and I said, okay, I understand what we need to do because you're not alone. Most of the women are like that. So that's kind of why we made this program for the women, and so that we could work with them. And it's like I tell all of our ladies, and they'll all say the same thing. I don't shoot that much. I'm just learning, and it's like, no problem. We'll take as much time as you need. We'll get it down so you can pass. But it's only as good as if you continue to practice. That's the only way that'll work. So that's how we ended up with the ladies programs.
And is that also part of your own vision of doing ministry through your business? Are these classes? Does that?
I think anytime you have a relationship with people, it's an opportunity for ministry, and bringing people in here to see who we are and what we believe in, and that we can take them through a process that sometimes is uncomfortable for them. Anytime you have an opportunity to see people, it's an opportunity for ministry.
In our class time, it's when you're talking about self-defense classes, you bridge a lot of conversation. I have people that come in and they want to carry a firearm, but they're not willing to take somebody's life. And so it's a very interesting conversation that we have with them, because you have to get them through, why are we doing this? First of all, you're doing it to protect yourself. And if somebody's attacking you, you need to be able to protect yourself and be willing to take somebody's life if you have to. And so I think with our Christian background, and we do get a lot of conversations with that, how is it morally, ethically right to be able to do that? Well, so those are conversations that we have, and I think people really benefit from it.
Yeah. And how do the two of you think about that individually, about what it means to be a Christian on the one hand, whose faith encourages love of others and love of neighbor, and then also the willingness to carry a lethal means of protection? How does that kind of work in your own minds?
Well, for me, it's very simple. It's very black and white for me. It's just it's my responsibility to protect my family at all times, at all costs. And I have no doubt in my mind that that's what God wants me to do, is to make sure that they're safe at all times. So it never crosses my mind. Even as I work with Diana and try to teach her, she's and I'll let her speak for herself, but getting her focused and making sure, when it comes to her children, absolutely, she would protect her children all the time. I'm a little more concerned how long it would take her to protect herself, but because she's a much gentler soul than I am.
Well, and I think one of the things that we talk about in our classes is to avoid situations, and that's our primary focus when we're talking to our classes is don't put yourself in a situation that could go bad. If there's a way to get out of it, get out of it. And that would be my first line, if I got myself into bad. Actually, I did. We were in Oklahoma a couple of years ago and stopped at a gas station. And John was pumping gas, and I went in to unfuel me, I guess I should say. And there was a gun by somebody in the store, and it went bad. And I walked in and walked back out to the car, and I said, John, the guy that's at the door in the store has a handgun in his pocket. There's arguing going on. We need to get out of here. And then we heard gunshots, lights went off, sirens started, and we left. And that's what we tell people. If you can get out of a situation, that's your first choice. If I had to be put into a situation where I defended my life, I would hope that John would be with me, because I know he would take care of me. And those are situations I'm still working through as an individual that does carry a firearm. I would probably want to reason with somebody, and that would probably end up making me dead.
Reasoning with somebody could put you in a compromised situation?
Yeah, it really could. But I probably would want to tell them that Jesus loves them and they don't need to do this. But that isn't what we teach our people in our classes to do. And I don't know that anybody John can say with complete certainty what he would do in his situation, and I'm not sure that I am at that point in my life, because I've grown up, love God, love people, and I would never want to cause harm. I'm a nurse by education, and my background is, and my formal training also has been to save people.
So this isn't just a matter of kind of a faith, but it's also your own professional ethics come into play there.
Right.
I had an uncle, and that's I think probably what's been ingrained in me forever. I had an uncle that actually had a home intrusion, and he had a .45 Colt at the time, and this would have probably been in the 50s, I assume.
This is a handgun you're talking about.
A handgun, yeah. And he actually pulled it out when this fella came in, and then elected not to use it. And the intruder actually took the firearm away from my uncle and pistol whipped him near death. So the bottom line is, I think if you're gonna carry a firearm, this is my personal view, my opinion. If you're going to carry a firearm and you're going to pull a firearm, you better be willing to use it, because if you don't, it's probably going to go bad. It's going to go the other way. And in that particular instance, that happened, and that's, I think, is probably one of the defining moments in my life, was my grandfather telling me that story, and him being adamant, if you're going to pull a firearm, use it.
So your grandfather also encouraged encouraged you to carry or to at least to have firearms available?
Yeah, at that point in time, and I've been raised in a family that constantly, I was around firearms. We started hunting at a very young age. I think I shot my first 410. I was like 8 years old or something like that. And my dad would take me squirrel hunting and pheasant hunting, and so I got the love of hunting from him. So, which if you're going to hunt, obviously you need the firearms. And my grandfather also had firearms, so I was always comfortable around him. And so yeah, that's where it would have started.
Do you ever come across people who come to your classes and maybe are to whom you might say, I'm not sure you should be carrying a firearm? Have you ever had that kind of situation?
Unfortunately, yeah. And
Is that right?
mean, it's even people that are sometimes close to us.
Okay.
What's interesting is I have a serious love for our military and our military folks. But they also end up being some of the biggest problems, because you'll find guys that were in the Korean War, for instance, and because they had formal military training, they think, I'm okay to carry a firearm. I've been trained in them, skilled in them. The problem with it is yeah, they were 40 years ago or 50 years ago, so they've lost their training and they lost just the things, the common sense that goes along with firearms. So they have this false sense of knowledge, and it's hard to turn them around. And just in the last class we had, I had an individual who was the same way. And when he walked out, he told me at that point in time that he really appreciated the class, that he realized there was a lot of things that he was deficit on, and just really didn't realize it. And that is an issue. And so there are people that let's put it this way, if I seriously believe that somebody shouldn't have one, I won't pass them. But for the most part, we can work folks through it. Our problem is that once they leave our class and they've actually passed, whatever testing that we do, including the shooting and so on and so forth, they have to continue with their training. If they don't continue with their training, they're not going to be, it won't be adequate for them in the event that they need it. And that's my concern, is that I promote dry firing with these people. They sit here,
That means firing without a round in the chamber.
Correct.
Yeah.
In their own home, just practice. Everybody wants to also be, they want to be John Wayne. They want to know why do we not teach drawing? And I said, because A, it's not safe. B, you're not skilled enough to do it. And if you want me to teach you how to draw, we'll do a separate class on that. But a concealed carry class is not the place for it. However, you're going to have to know how to do that in the event of a high-stress situation. So, and there's no way without repetition that they're going to be able to accomplish that feat. So I promote that, but I only get them for about 6 to 8 hours. So I can't teach them everything. I have to teach them the basics, and then just pray that they're going to go on and learn more as they leave my classroom.
So let me go back to the origins of FOG really quickly and ask how did that dream sort of come into your heart to put FOG together? Do you remember back?
Well, it was just specifically trying to give my son.
Yeah, for your son.
Give him a business, and Diana felt that was something we helped our other son get into his first business, and she felt that was something she wanted to do with this one, and so we were able to do it. And with his love of the firearms, and he's very passionate, and he's a woodworker. He's very good with stock work.
In fact, we're going to look at, I think you maybe can show us some of the stock work that he's done.
Yeah. His grandfather is a very good woodworker, and he was able to work with Blake, for years, and teaching him some of the skills that he had. And so it was interesting to see Blake, and this was in this, turning bowls or chess pieces or things like that, and then to see Blake move that into stock work was really an interesting change. And so I think there's no thinking about it. I know that the reason that FOG was created was specifically for him. Mm-hmm. And just Diana's desire and my desire that he'd be able to have a viable business to be able to raise his family and in a passion that he enjoys. Her father used to always say, and I never say this quite right, but find a job that's a hobby and you'll never have to go to work. And with Blake, that's what he's got. He has a hobby, and so if you don't mind getting up and going to work, then it's not really work.
And he gets to work with his dad, which is all the better.
And I both
and mom.
Yeah, both my boys have been able to spend lots of time with them, and it's a real blessing to have family time. And a lot of families can't do that. Diane and I have been able to work together our entire lives, and that's really unusual. But I know that's truly a gift from Christ, because you just can't do it without it. You're so close in the things that you do, and so it's when you throw one more of your sons into the business, it creates some interesting situations, but it's definitely has its benefits.
And what's next for Fog? What do you see? What do you see on the horizon, or what are your hopes and dreams?
Well, my personal view is that we're able to get the Fog line on some of the major distributors' shelves. I think that might happen. And again, this is not, I love it. I absolutely love working here with them, with Blake and with Diana. This is not, I'm getting to the age where I'm slowing down. There's just not a lot of things that, I don't go 15 hours like I used to. But the business needs to perpetuate. They need to be able, Blake needs to continue moving it forward, building it. And then really it's in his hands. It's his business. He can do as he pleases. If he wants to grow it very large, he can do it. In our country, that's possible. And as long as he remembers to, follow God's will, it'll go wherever he's designed it to go.
Diane, any thoughts on Fog's future?
Well, we do have some things that are on the shelf right now that we're hoping will come to fruition with some big distributors, and that will be really nice for us. If that happens, we'll have to expand some, and I think John mentioned earlier, we have a real heart for vets, and we've been able to contact several people that are out there that are vets that we'd like to be able to hire. And
you've already hired some vets, I understand.
We have one that is currently working for us, another one that does some part-time work for us, and we just find that they're excellent, focused employees, and they understand what we're doing and the needs for it, and we just feel very honored to have them as employees here. So we're hoping that in 2015 we see a lot of growth that way, and in doing that too, we're hoping to be able to support our passions, our ministries a little bit more too.
Our gunsmithing operation has just exploded.
You have 3 gunsmiths, or 2?
You have 2 right
Blake
now.
and
Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we're actually in contact with the school right now and looking at maybe bringing a couple more gunsmiths on.
The same school that your son attended
Yes.
in Colorado?
Yeah. So Blake made the calls to the school the other day and is trying to set up appointments and so we can get out there and maybe look at them. I really expect that to continue to expanding, and we've added a line of Cerakote, so we're doing gun finishes along with that. And as they open up this new building, I would expect that they'll do traditional bluing and finishing also beyond the Cerakoting. But both of Blake and Patrick also have their machinist degrees, and so I would imagine that, which I know Blake would really like to do, is to get some machinery and actually be able to do some of the machinist work also.
So building firearms,
Yeah.
and not just servicing them?
Well, building and also just repairing firearms. We get a lot of old firearms that come into the shop where they have to actually make the parts for, and the parts are no longer available. Patrick, I think he's one of his expertise is on Walther springs.
Oh.
So he has, he repairs a lot of German Walthers, that were World War II era that you can't buy the parts for. So he actually hand builds the springs for them. So they have an amazing skill, and now just figuring out what they want to do with it.
Yeah, I guess the machinist skills go right alongside his
gunsmithing skills.
It's actually, it's probably required. It's not only
Yeah.
something that they want to do, because there's all sorts of stuff. We do a lot of accurizing with rifles and rifle loads. And so that's one of Blake's things, is he really likes to blueprint firearms. Well, obviously that's a machining.
What does that mean, to blueprint firearms?
Well, what he does, they true up the actions, and so they actually true up the bolt faces and everything, and make so they can get the actual best accuracy out of those firearms. And then we'll actually make custom make ammunition that's specifically for that. We call it serialized ammunition. And so when they get the whole thing done, then you get the best performance out of a rifle that you can possibly expect. And you know, we do it for just hunters. We probably have 6 or 7 that are firearms that are sitting here ready to be accurized. And I also have, I can't tell you, maybe another 8 or 10 probably that we have that I'm supposed to be working ammunition on for them. It won't go to an accurizing stage, but they just want more accurate ammunition than they can buy off the shelf at the local sporting goods store.
While visiting FOG, we also had the opportunity to tour their manufacturing facilities. In the video that you're watching right now, Blake, John and Diana's son, gives me a tour of those manufacturing facilities. Blake is a trained gunsmith, and he also, as part of his role at FOG, oversees these machines, which are apparently quite prolific. According to Blake, the machine that you can see here in the video can put out over 3,000 rounds of ammunition in a single hour. And so they have a number of these machines that Blake said can occasionally be a little bit finicky. So part of his job is to keep those things running. In addition to creating ammunition, they also have the opportunity to sell the guns that shoot the ammunition. And so they have a small kind of storefront, as it were, where they have guns on sale. Additionally, they also are able to do some external coating of those guns. It's called Cerakoting, and Cerakoting can add to the durability of the gun. It can add to the corrosion resistance of a gun. It can also simply be there either as camouflage or even as for ornamental purposes. So Blake is also able to do those things, and it seems to be a regular part of their business. And finally, as Diana mentioned at an earlier part of this video, the family is also involved in teaching concealed carry and other gun-related classes. So people who are interested in gaining either legal status to carry a gun or simply want further training can attend those classes through FOG. We were with John and Diana for 2 days, but it doesn't take that long to realize that they are passionate about the outdoors and about hunting in particular. The moment you walk into either their business office or their home, you realize that that they are passionate about these things. And one knows this because of the many taxidermy specimens that are found all over the place, ornamenting various areas of their home and especially the FOG office. And so you spend enough time around hunters and you realize that for every one of those mounts or pieces of taxidermy, every one of those animals, there is a story. So I asked John to share one story, a particularly memorable story, and he chose actually to share a story about his lion hunt. The 2 continents from which John and Diane have taken the most animals, at least as far as I could tell, are North America and Africa. And so John shares here about his lion hunt, and then also a little bit about some of the other big game that he's taken in Africa.
Well, this lion was actually taken in Zimbabwe, and Diana and I had gone over there on a 21-day safari. And we'd actually been hunting the lions for, well, from the start. Actually, what you do is you end up, you shoot your bait, and then you try to get the lions to come to the bait. That's basically the way it works.
What are you using for bait in this case?
In this particular instance, you can use anything. I mean, but in this particular case, we were using zebra. Zebra is not utilized by the indigenous population for food. So everything that we did hunt all went to the locals. And in that particular instance, the zebra doesn't. And it seems like the cats have a real taste for the zebra. And so anyway, that's what we did with that. We got our bait, and then we started hanging the baits out, and we got them hung out, and then continued with our hunt, and then we check on our baits, as the day progressed, and go back and make sure that there wasn't anything on a bait. And then when you'd find a bait, then you'd build a blind, and then we'd set in the blind. Well, we had baits up, and we were hunting, and it was very hot, and we were actually chasing some plains game, and I'd gotten very dehydrated, and I was predisposed to kidney stones. So anyway, I'd gotten very sick and started to pass some kidney stones.
Oh no!
And my PH came and said, "John, it's time to go. We've got a lion on bait." And I told him, I said, "I can't. I mean, it was all I could do. It was all I could do to survive. I mean, I hadn't eaten in several days. I hadn't drank in several days, and was vomiting, and it was terrible." Well, anyway, he says, "You got to do it. You got to muster it up. Let's go do it. You're going to get it." And I said, "Okay, I can." Diana said, "You've got to go do it." So I did. We went out to check the bait, and absolutely, when you look at a bait, you'll look on the tree where you hang it from, and what you do is you look for the pieces of the mane. Then you know that whether a male's been actually on that bait as opposed to cubs or a lion.
Well, so they'll shed part of their
They'll
mane
shed part of that
on
the
prey,
tree
or on
Yep.
the bait. Yeah.
And so you'll see that on there. Then you know, okay, we've got a male, and that's what we really want to do. So we found out it was definitely a male that was on there. So we set up the blind and got ready for that evening's hunt. And so we heard the lion, and he was actually just like what you would see on TV. You could hear him roaring in the background, and it was very exciting. And then all of a sudden it just went still, and we couldn't find him. We thought he must have winded us, or must have known something was up. And probably 20 minutes or a half hour went by, and I remember at this point in time I'm suffering from kidney stones. I mean, they have what's actually called the kidney stone sway, and people that have kidney stones,
Wow.
they just constantly do this. Well, it's not good in a hunting event because you're trying to be still. And well, it didn't work. The good news, I was in a blind, but anyway, so I'm doing my sway, and I'm just trying to just survive. And for whatever reason, I could hear something, and it was just a light crunch or something, and I turned to the right, and literally about 18 feet away from us, this lion had stalked around behind us. And he was actually, all of a sudden the hunters were the prey. Go probably another 30 feet and piled up. So it was pretty exciting. It happened, very quickly. And fortunately, nobody was injured. I mean, things can go sideways in those hunts. And, I had a good PH at that time. And
What does PH stand for?
professional hunter.
Got it. Okay, so this is a guide,
Yeah.
effectively.
You're required you also have to have with you a government. It's actually a government guide, but he's the guy that goes with you everywhere you go, that makes sure that you're following the laws of the country.
Compliance officer, basically.
That's exactly what he is, and sometimes they can be a bit of a pain, but you always have those guys with you, and then everything is right, at least in to my world. I don't know the rules in Zimbabwe, so it's nice to be able to know that happens that way. So we were able to take this lion. He was about, it was to me probably the trophy of a lifetime, and people really don't understand over there, they don't understand it here. These lions prey on the local folks that are there, and it's amazing the damage that they do when it comes to their cattle and their goats and things like that. So they do have a lot of problem lions. This one was not a problem lion, but they really monitor. They need to monitor the these cats that are over there, and it's important through paid hunting that gets done, because the monies go to the folks where you're on whatever concession you're in. It goes to the locals that are there, and it really is game management, and it's great for us as hunters because we get the opportunity to do something that most people don't get to do. Yet we can help the local economy and control the populations of their big cats, which really cause issues over there.
Diana, you mentioned that there was something else you wanted to talk about from the lion hunt here.
Yeah.
You were on that hunt, and you often accompany John on these hunts, right? As
I
the
didn't
photographer.
I wasn't in the blind when he actually hunted this. I did go when they hung the bait and when they built the blind, which was actually very fascinating how they would take all of this kind of straw and build a blind out of it. But during that whole time, Blake, our youngest, was still in high school, and we were gone for an extended period of time, and I was getting rather homesick. And before John got so sick, while we were over there, he was passing a kidney stone, I wanted to go home. And there was one morning that I had gotten up very early, and I was sitting out overlooking the whole terrain, and I was doing my my daily devotion in the morning, and I was praying, and just praying that Blake was okay at home and everything was all right there. And I'm sure I was irritating my husband somewhat because he just said, fine, you can just go home and I'm going to finish the hunt. And I was very conflicted because I wanted to spend time. This was in celebration of our 25th wedding anniversary. And so we were there, and so I was praying, and I just was asking God to give me direction. And it was the first time in my life I felt like I heard the audible voice of God, because I just heard the word, "Stay, daughter." And I went, okay, who said that? And I did stay, and John got very, very, very ill.
He talked about the kidney stones.
Yes, he did. He got very dehydrated, and he was up night after night. The nights were very, very long. And it would not have been a good situation had I left him there. So
You are a trained nurse. We should also mention that
you're
a registered nurse.
And, yeah. We did go get some medical help, which was very interesting. They took us down out of camp down to the city of Victoria Falls, where there was a hospital. And we walked into the hospital, and there really weren't sides on the hospital. It was kind of like they had hanging sheets, and there were 3 wards that were there. And in each ward, they had these metal gurneys that people were laying on, totally uncomfortable. And the families had to bring their own linens in. And it was really when the AIDS crisis was very, very bad. This was 12 years ago in Zimbabwe. And there was a women's ward, a men's ward, and then there was a children's ward. And you know, by looking at those people in each one of those wards, they were probably dying from AIDS. And I remember walking in, and John was so ill, and he looked at me and said, "Do not leave me here." I said, "No, we're just going to get you some help." And we did. The doctor came in, and I said, "He's got a kidney stone." And, "Well, how do you know he has a kidney stone?" "Well, he's had him before. I'm a nurse. This is what's going on." And they were like, "You're a nurse? Like, can you help us here?" They were just desperate. But I do believe that God told me I needed to stay and be able to help John work through the whole situation with his medical condition at that time.
Yeah, and I really believe that if she wasn't there, if she hadn't stayed, I really believe I probably wouldn't have got out of there. I woke up in the middle of one night, and I told her that morning, I said, "You have to get me out of here or I will die tomorrow." And this was about a 6-day battle that was going on. And I passed that stone, or started past the stone. We did the hunt, and it all kind of culminated. We went fine. Then the very next day, then I was totally debilitated the next day. Stuck me in a wheelchair, and were trying to get me to Johannesburg to the hospital so I could get actual medical care. And they wouldn't let me on the airplane. And
That's right.
so
Because of your condition?
Well, now just because of the political issues.
Oh, okay.
Nobody does anything for nothing there.
Okay.
And so what they ended up doing was bartering a half of a Cape Buffalo for the meat to let me on the plane.
And had you shot one earlier?
No.
Did you? Okay.
I had, but that wasn't they just actually promised the guy at Buffalo.
Got it. Okay. That was the currency that you needed at the moment.
That was the currency we needed to get me out of the country so I could get medical care.
It's just so different, because can you imagine going to the Minneapolis airport, and the baggage claim guy say, "Yeah, I'll let you on if you bring me a side of beef." I mean, that's basically
Right, that's basically
what
what
it
it
was.
was.
It was a bribe to get him onto the airplane. And when we got on the airplane and got down to Joburg and went to a clinic, and these sweet nuns were there. They fixed him right up and got IV fluids in him and medication, and we were on our way.
So now I'm the poster child for these. We actually travel now with the extraction insurance. So whenever we go,
Oh,
anywhere,
sure, right.
I know firsthand what the medical care is like over there. Never leave home without the extraction.
This extraction insurance.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well, thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. manufacturing facility.